The day my manager promoted his nephew instead of me, something inside me broke so quietly that no one in the room even noticed. I didn't argue. I didn't question him. I didn't even react. I just sat there, staring at the table, realizing that 5 years of loyalty had been erased in less than 5 seconds. My name is Corwin Hale, and for 5 years, I was the person this company depended on when everything else failed. I fixed systems no one understood. I saved clients who were already walking away. I stayed when everyone else left. And the worst part wasn't losing the promotion. The worst part was realizing that it was never mine to lose. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. 5 years earlier, when I first walked into Virion Dynamics, the company was barely functioning. Employees did the minimum required to survive. Problems were ignored until they became disasters. But I didn't see it as a broken place. I saw it as an opportunity to build something meaningful, something stable. I stayed late when no one asked me to. I took responsibility when no one wanted it. Slowly, people began to trust me. Slowly, I became someone they relied on. And slowly, without realizing it, I became someone they would eventually replace. The day my manager promoted his nephew people respected from a distance. Something inside me broke so quietly that no one in the room even noticed. He spoke calmly. I didn't argue. And when he gave instructions, I didn't question him. Listened. I didn't even react. At first, he treated me like everyone else, staring at the table. But over time, that changed. Realizing that 5 years of loyalty directly to my desk in less than 5 seconds. He trusted me with responsibilities that for 5 years belonged to higher positions. I was the person this company depended on. He included me in meetings I wasn't technically supposed to. I fixed systems no one understood. One night, I saved a major system recovery that I handled alone. I stayed when everyone else and said something I never forgot. And the worst part wasn't losing. He told me I was the future of the department. The worst part was realizing that it was never mine to lose. And then, in a quiet voice, he told me that when the director position opened, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, he said it like a plan, and sharing it with the people you care about. From that moment on, everything 5 years earlier, when I first walked into Virion Dynamics, the company was barely felt temporary. Employees I believed I was building towards something real. Problems were ignored until they became disasters. But I didn't see it as a broken place. I saw it as an opportunity to build something meaningful, something stable. I stayed late when no one asked me to. I took responsibility when no one wanted it. Slowly, people began to trust me. Slowly, I became someone they relied on. And slowly, without realizing it, I became someone they would eventually replace. When Calix Voss arrived, he didn't look nervous the way most new hires did. He looked comfortable, like he already belonged there. Ellery introduced him as his nephew and said he wanted him to learn the business from the ground up. That didn't concern me at first. Companies hired relatives all the time. It didn't mean anything. But Calix didn't start at the ground. He started beside Ellery. He attended meetings that experienced employees weren't invited to. He observed decisions he hadn't earned the right to understand. Sometimes Ellery would ask me to explain systems to him, to show him how things worked. I assumed he wanted him to learn. I assumed it was temporary. Calix never showed the urgency I had shown when I started. He never stayed late. He never carried responsibility. He didn't need to, because he already had something I didn't. Access. The announcement happened on a normal Tuesday morning. He didn't look nervous the way most new hires did. There was nothing unusual about the day. He looked comfortable, Ellery asked everyone to gather in the conference room. Ellery introduced him as his voice was calm, confident, and said he wanted him to learn the business from the ground up. He spoke about leadership. Me at first. He spoke about the companies hired relatives all the time. I sat there quietly. It didn't mean anything. Already knowing what he was about to say. But Calix didn't start at the ground. Or at least I thought I did. He started beside Ellery. When he said Calix's name, he attended meetings that experienced employees weren't invited to. No one spoke. He observed decisions he hadn't. Everyone in that room knew what had just happened. Sometimes Ellery would ask me to explain systems to him. They knew who had built the foundation he was now standing on. I assumed he wanted him to learn. Ellery didn't look at me. I assumed it was temporary. And in that moment, Calix never showed the urgency I had never understood before. He never stayed late. Hard work makes you valuable. He never carried responsibility. But it doesn't make you untouchable. He didn't need to, because he already had something I didn't. Access. After the meeting ended, people walked out slowly, avoiding eye contact with me like they were afraid my disappointment might be contagious. No one said congratulations to Calix with real enthusiasm. Their voices sounded forced, empty, like they were performing something they didn't believe in. I stayed seated for a few seconds longer, staring at the same spot on the table, replaying Ellery's words in my head. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I understood them too well. Eventually, I stood up and walked back to my desk. Everything looked the same. My chair. My monitor. my coffee mug that had been sitting there since morning. But something inside me had shifted permanently. Lenora Kessler, who sat across from me, looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just gave me a quiet nod, the kind people give when they know words won't help. About an hour later, I received an email from Ellery asking me to come to his office. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry either. I just felt empty. When I walked in, he gestured for me to sit down. He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look guilty. He looked calm, like this was just another routine conversation. He told me how valuable I was to the team. He told me how much he appreciated my work. He told me he hoped I understood that these decisions were complicated. What he didn't say was the truth. He didn't say that he chose family over loyalty. After the next few days, people walked out slowly, painfully clear. Avoiding eye contact with me like they were afraid my disappointment, the one I had imagined sitting in for months. No one said congratulations to Calix with real enthusiasm. He wasn't there to build something forced, empty. He was there to inherit something that already they didn't believe in. Ellery started including him in high-level discussions immediately, staring at the same spot on the table. Those discussions still depended in my head. Calix would ask questions he should have already known I understood them too well, and Ellery would look at me to respond. I stood up and walked back to my desk. It was subtle but obvious. Everything looked the same. Calix had the title, my chair, but I still carried my monitor. My coffee mug that had been sitting there since morning. My desk, but something inside me had shifted one of the core systems I had designed. Lenora Kessler, his tone wasn't arrogant, looked like she wanted to say something either, but it was worse. She just gave me a quiet nod, like he assumed I would always give when they know words won't help. As I explained about an hour later, I realized I received an email from Ellery asking me to come to his office. I wasn't being respected anymore. I wasn't nervous. I was being used. I wasn't angry. They didn't promote him. I just felt empty. When I walked in, he gestured because I was capable enough to support him. He didn't look uncomfortable, and for the first time in 5 years, he looked calm, I began to question why this was just another routine conversation. He told me how valuable I was to the team. He told me how much he appreciated my work. He told me he hoped I understood that these decisions were complicated. What he didn't say was the truth. He didn't say that he chose family over loyalty. At night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything I had given to that place. I thought about the weekends I had sacrificed, the relationships I had neglected, and the parts of myself I had ignored because I believed in a future that no longer existed. I had convinced myself that patience would be rewarded, that loyalty would be recognized. But loyalty, I realized, only matters when the other person values it. Ellery didn't value it. He valued control. He valued family. He valued convenience. And I had made his life convenient. The next morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. Not because I wanted to fix anything, but because I wanted to see everything clearly. I walked through the department slowly, looking at the systems, the people, and the environment I had helped stabilize. For the first time, I didn't feel pride. I felt distance. Like I no longer belonged there. At the moment I decided to resign, I couldn't stop thinking about everything I had given to that place. There was no argument. No confrontation. I thought about the weekends I had sacrificed. Just clarity. The relationships when I watched Calix struggle to parts of myself I had ignored because I believed in a future that no longer existed. He looked at me instinctively, waiting for me to step in and patience would be rewarded. The way I always had. That loyalty would be recognized. And I realized that as long as I stayed, loyalty, I realized, only matters. He would continue to rely on me. Ellery would continue to rely on me. He valued control. And I would continue to exist in the shadow of a position I had earned, but would never receive. And I had made his life convenient. That afternoon, the next morning, I opened a blank document. I arrived at work earlier than usual, stared at it for a long time. Not because I wanted to fix anything. My hands didn't shake, but because I wanted to see everything clearly. I felt calm. I walked through the department. I typed a single sentence, looking at the systems, my last day will be 2 weeks and the environment I had helped stabilize. As I read those words, for the first time, I didn't feel pride. I felt freedom. I felt for the first time in 5 years, like I no longer belonged. I wasn't building their future anymore. I was preparing to take mine back. When I handed Ellery my resignation letter, he didn't react the way I expected. He didn't look angry. He didn't look disappointed. He looked surprised. Not shocked, not devastated, just surprised, like something predictable had suddenly become real. He read the letter twice, his eyes moving slowly across the single sentence that ended 5 years of loyalty. Then he looked up at me, studying my face like he was trying to find hesitation. "You don't have to do this," he said calmly. His voice carried the same tone he used when he believed he was still in control. I didn't respond immediately. I just sat there, watching him process something he had never considered before, the possibility of losing me. For years, he had assumed I would stay no matter what happened. He had assumed my loyalty was permanent. But loyalty isn't permanent when it isn't respected. I told him quietly that my decision was final. For the first time since I had known him, he didn't have a response ready. When I handed Ellery my resignation letter, strange silence. He didn't react the way People treated me differently. He didn't look angry. Some avoided me. He didn't look sure of what to say. Others spoke carefully, not shocked. Like they were afraid of acknowledging something. Just surprised, like something predictable. Calix tried to act confident. He read the letter twice, uncertainty in his eyes moving slowly. He asked across the single sentence that he avoided conversations that required real. Then he looked up at me. Ellery, studying my face like he was trying to more attentive than he had ever been. You don't have to do this, checked him more often. Calmly. He asked if I voice carried the same tone. He offered small gestures that came too late to matter. I didn't respond immediately. Of appreciation. I just sat there. They were acts of realization. Watching him process something he was beginning to understand the weight of what he had done. The possibility of losing. On my last day, for years, he had assumed I would stay no matter what happened. He had assumed my loyalty was just a quiet exit. But loyalty, as I walked out of the building, I didn't look back. I told him because I was angry, my decision because I was no longer connected. For the first time since I had known him, I had given them everything. I didn't have a response ready. There was nothing left to leave behind. The first call came 3 weeks later. I recognized Ellery's number immediately, but I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. His voice sounded different, less certain, less controlled. He asked how I was doing, but I knew that wasn't why he called. After a brief pause, he admitted that things were becoming difficult. Systems were failing more often. Problems were taking longer to resolve. Clients were becoming frustrated. He didn't ask me to come back directly, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear. He was facing the consequences of his decision. I listened quietly, not out of satisfaction, but out of understanding. For the first time, he was experiencing the absence of something he had taken for granted. When he finished speaking, I told him calmly that I had moved on, that I hoped things worked out for him. And then I ended the call. Not out of revenge, but out of closure. Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger. It's absence. The first call came 3 weeks later. I heard through former coworkers I recognized Ellery's number struggling to maintain stability. But I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. Clients left. His voice sounded internal confidence weakened. Less certain. Calix remained in the position. He asked how I was doing, became the leader, but I knew that wasn't why he called. Leadership after a brief pause, he admitted that things were becoming difficult. And building takes systems were failing sacrifice and experience. Problems were taking longer. Things he had never needed to earn. Clients were becoming frustrated. I found something better. He didn't ask me to come back not just another job, but a place where my work was respected without needing promises. He was facing the consequences. A place where my value wasn't conditional. I listened quietly, looking back, not out of satisfaction. I realized that losing that promotion wasn't the worst thing. For the first time, staying would experiencing the absence because sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you. When he finished sometimes speaking, it frees you. I told him calmly, and the greatest revenge isn't watching. That I hope things worked out for him. It's realizing you no longer need them to succeed. Not out of revenge, but out of closure. Because sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger. It's absence.